episode 4. Thanks everyone for joining back. In this one, we're going to get probably the most technical we've gotten so far in the videos, but it's going to be really important. In this video, we're going to talk about estate planning and inheritance planning for Bitcoin. Obviously, many of you watching have kids or grandkids. And so in this video, we're going to talk about how the Bitcoin advisor assists people in helping kids, spouses, nieces, nephews, friends, coworkers, whomever you want to receive that Bitcoin. So Peter, as always, thank you for joining me. And let's break this down. Bitcoin estate planning, despite popular perception that Bitcoiners are in it for the 2-week gains and short-term mindset, most of us are really long-term mindset. So for people watching this that are learning about Bitcoin estate planning, what's your take? What are the requirements, and how does Bitcoin Advisor meet those requirements?
That's a very good question, and this can be broken down into two parts, really. There is firstly the legal framework for your estate plan that has its own jurisdictional challenges and opportunities. And then there is the pragmatic recovery of your Bitcoin. So I might just start with the legal, and on the legal side of things, preface this by saying, unless you can pragmatically recover your Bitcoin, then no legal decree, last will and testament, court order, or any other legal decree mandated by the government or said jurisdiction can move your Bitcoin. So this is where the Bitcoin advisor focuses heavily on an estate plan protocol that will ensure the pragmatic recovery of your Bitcoin so that can work hand in hand or in unison with your last will and testament. And this is where I think a lot of Bitcoiners haven't looked at the opportunities that are afforded to them when they look at the potential for estate planning protocols. And let me just run around the world as to what are some of the benefits with addressing this before Bitcoin goes to the moon. And I might start with the US. So in the US, you have inheritance tax, and it can be a doozy. It can be upwards of 30% that you are going to pass up if you die in the United States of America. And that's a hefty fee to pay. And a good estate planner will help you not evade those taxes, because everyone has to pay them if you do that. But addressing estate planning protocol, well, the legal side of estate planning now will enable you to minimize the tax payable on an estate transfer when you pass. And this is really critical. No one I know wants to give 30% to the government because they pass away. And it's really important if Bitcoiners feel that way. And from my experience, Bitcoiners are probably the most agitative towards the government
Passionate.
that I've seen as far
the word
as
is passionate, Peter.
Thank you. We would prefer to see our family and friends benefit from our hard work and sacrifices that we've made with Bitcoin. And the thought of handing over 30 to 40% in an inheritance tax when you pass is almost vomit worthy to some. And this is where addressing this ahead of time before you pass will solve a multitude of issues for you, in that you may be able to reduce that tax significantly. You may be able to put that Bitcoin into structures that affords better legal and asset protection. You may be putting that Bitcoin into structures that are going to afford better tax outcomes than you could have dreamt of previously by owning it personally. And then the other big one that we work with a number of clients in the US is to help in asset protection. So putting it in structures that is going to give you the best form of legal protection in the event of litigation. And I think the top 10 states in the world for litigation happen to be in the United States. So it's very important to have your assets locked down.
You mean global states, not states as in the US,
global
right?
states,
Yeah,
correct. So out of every nation on earth and all the states that they comprise of, the United States has 10 of the top 10. Actually, maybe New South Wales in Australia has one of the top 10 holdings. But this is very critical. And this is where we want Bitcoiners to start thinking about this stuff before Bitcoin goes to millions of dollars or billions of dollars a coin. Because if you're holding a Bitcoin now, you're going to be very wealthy. And the work I've done in the past, well, even to the day, is not only about increasing clients' wealth, but the most important part is about preserving it for longevity and intergenerational wealth. And this is where An estate planning protocol that the Bitcoin advisor delivers is really about the pragmatic recovery of your Bitcoin. The worst thing that could possibly happen is you've done all this hard work, you've saved your entire life in Bitcoin, you've hodled as hard as you can, and then you get to the end of your life, you hand over whatever it is to your loved ones, and they're unable to recover it because your security protocol is so perfect, only one person on earth can recover it, that being you. And this is where the Bitcoin advisor steps in to help solve that problem. And this is where I want to bring awareness to the broader legal implications from estate planning, in that when you look around the world, there's also a whole host of benefits that can happen from addressing this sooner rather than later. And it may look like a fairly expensive exercise, but when you think of how much it could cost you down the track, it's one of the best investments that you can make.
Definitely 100%. It's something that this is one of those topics, and this is why this is a video earlier in the series we're doing, is because I think this is one of the most underappreciated components of Bitcoin, right? Everyone likes to click my videos. Everyone likes to click your podcast, Peter. Big number go up stuff like, oh, Bitcoin's going to 1 million or 1 billion or 1 trillion or whatever, big zeros, right? Everyone wants to hear a Bitcoin number go up, but no one likes to consider the real ramifications that if you become a high net worth person, that all of a sudden you're a much larger target for lawsuits. All of a sudden you're a much larger target for death taxes and estate taxes, right? And so these things that for right now, the average person, watching this, with a smaller net worth, may not face these problems day to day, and they may not have people in their network that face these problems day to day. So they're not really in our peripheral vision. But the reality is that if you own one Bitcoin and you believe that there are only, let's say 15 million Bitcoin that have not been lost, that's 1/15 millionth of the world's money, at least theoretically. And so all of a sudden you begin to realize, even if I only own one Bitcoin, this whole, trust, legal planning, estate tax, this, that, like these are going to become real issues. Maybe not for you, but for your kids or for your future generations. And so, Peter, I think this is a really good point. And regarding the cost too, this is something I've tried to explain to people, is that, oh, well, a 1% fee is really expensive. But the reality is that, if our input over the coming years and decades can help lower a given estate tax or given death tax from, let's say theoretically, 40% to 20%, or from 20% to 0%, or from, whatever, like very easily, just with some minor shifts, again, like Peter's saying, doing it now before Bitcoin increases in value, some minor shifts could easily save, 5, 10, perhaps even higher percentage points, which works out to, years, if not decades worth of value or cost of what we charge. So anyway, point is, I think, Peter, you're bringing up really good points. One component is the actual security of the Bitcoin, like on the blockchain. Doesn't matter what legal entity you have. If the Bitcoin's gone, it's gone, 100% loss. And then on top of that, you have the legal component where you want to minimize and avoid those taxes as much as possible. Not evasion, because tax evasion is illegal.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what does that look like on a practical level for people? Like, obviously there's a protocol, like people watching may not be aware, like what is the protocol? What are the different trust, retirement accounts, and options that the Bitcoin advisor can help with, right? Can Bitcoin advisor help with Roth IRAs? That's a question I had yesterday before recording this video. Like, can you break down what does all this practically mean for people on an individual basis?
Sure thing. Well, for anyone listening to this in English, and most of the Western democracies, we work on mostly a British common law system. Even you in the US have a fundamental basis in that, apart from Louisiana, which is more the French system. With that throwback to common British law, common law in Britain, we have a number of different structures that you can access on a personal level. So you can hold your Bitcoin in your personal name. That gives you no legal protection. It affords you no tax flexibility. It affords you effectively no rights. And it's probably the most basic of holding your Bitcoin. And this is where I think the majority of Bitcoiners would initially buy Bitcoin and hold it in their personal name. And this, when Bitcoin goes up substantially, will become a significant issue for them in the form of potential litigation, in the form of being able to minimize the tax payable, and ultimately with the transfer of assets, on death having to pay estate or death duties. So that's the most basic of ownership, in that you own it in your personal name. There is then a trust. You can have all sorts of trusts. In Australia, in America, in the UK, you can have a multitude of different trusts. And those trusts are typically used to hold Bitcoins on your behalf. The legal framework for that is that you control the trust. There may be significant benefits to having that Bitcoin in a trust, in that it puts it beyond the reach of litigation. It puts it beyond the reach of someone who's potentially suing you. It also gives you the flexibility to distribute to multiple family members in the event of a taxable event, which can help substantially reduce your tax payable on the sale of an asset. And a lot of people use trust structures, particularly family trusts, in a way to do that. There's also in the US an irrevocable trust, which you can use to create effectively early inheritance to help get round, not get round, I shouldn't say that. You effectively transfer ownership of your assets to other people prior to your death. And that circumvents the fact that you've got to pay death duties on your death for those assets, because they're no longer your assets. You've passed control of them to someone else, and you might control them until death, but on your death, they actually turn up in someone else's name. That's a great structure for being able to minimize some of the estate taxes that we've seen. There's also company structures that you can use across the globe. So we all have the ability to set up a company and put Bitcoin into a company. This is probably an option that I'm not really comfortable. I'm just trying to work out how I would describe the company setup. Companies are typically set up to run businesses, and to hold assets and distribute funds is typically not the best vehicle for doing that. So I'll just say, most of the time, and there are obviously exceptions to all of this, trusts might be a better way of doing that rather than a company. There are also some limitations globally around the world of what companies can and can't do, particularly with borrowing. And this is where they're somewhat limited in their options when it comes to that type of thing. So it's a limited structure that gives you less flexibility than the trust typically. So for that reason, trusts are usually a preferred option. The final one that is available in the US and across a number of other countries is looking at the pension system. So your IRA. And what that means is you can take your pension money and put that into an IRA where you buy Bitcoin, you hold the key to your own Bitcoin, and you have your retirement savings holding Bitcoin. This to me is a hugely tax advantage position to leave your money in, because my understanding is those IRAs are effectively a tax haven. In the US, we have a similar structure in Australia called superannuation system, which is effectively our pension system, where you can do the same thing here through a self-managed super fund vehicle. Unfortunately, the UK doesn't have that option. And this is great distress to a lot of our UK clients that they aren't able to hold direct Bitcoin in their retirement accounts. But the beauty is, for those clients who are in the US and Australia, we have the opportunity to do that. And I think it's a huge advantage to be able to hold your own Bitcoin in your retirement account, because typically that's an investment time frame that works on the next 20 to 40 years. If I look at the conversation we're having, Luke, you're circa 25, I'm circa 45. I've got 20 years before I can access my pension. You've got 40 years before you can access your pension. All of a sudden, you've got 40 years of compounding. I've got 20 years of compounding, holding this Bitcoin asset that we can't otherwise touch. And this represents a massive opportunity for people to dig themselves out of a hole and provide themselves a very comfortable retirement if Bitcoin does what we think it's going to do.
Correct. I think that's a huge advantage people need to keep in mind, because this is one of the things I hear all the time online is that, oh, well, I unfortunately can't do a Roth IRA, biased towards my American, peers. from my American friends, I hear, oh, my Roth IRA or my 401k or this, that, the other, I can't buy Bitcoin, right? And that's true. With a single SIG, again, going back to custody, with single SIG, you can't do that because the government doesn't have a way to validate that. But the beauty with multi-sig, especially in particular collateral custody multi-sig, is that all of a sudden, all these trusts, all these Roths, all these IRAs, all these, superannuation funds, different countries have different names for them. But the beauty is that in having collateral custody, in having multi-sig solutions for the Bitcoin, that makes all these tax deferred accounts viable pretty much instantly, right? In my opinion, Peter, I'm assuming yours too, is that that's only going to get exponentially more common, right? That over time, as more people want Bitcoin in their retirement accounts and they want actual Bitcoin, not fake ETF Bitcoin, they're going to realize that multi-sig and collateral custody is really important for actually being able to hold and verify that Bitcoin is within said retirement or trust account.
Absolutely. And this is where the growing distrust of our existing financial system is pouring more and more people and capital into direct ownership of Bitcoin. And the IRA is such a fabulous product because it allows Bitcoiners to get more Bitcoin without affecting any household budgets. It's a retirement account. You can't touch it till you retire. So that's typically 65 years of age. And I don't know a Bitcoiner who doesn't want more Bitcoin. However, usually the constraint that most people face with trying to get more Bitcoin is to have household cash flows are typically the constraint, or access to capital on the personal front. Therein lies the problem, and therein lies the opportunity for the IRA and pension funds to own your Bitcoin directly, in that without any out-of-pocket expenses, you can go and find a pool of capital that's yours, that you've got full control over, and you can go and buy more Bitcoin. So it's if you're a Bitcoiner and you want more Bitcoin, it's probably the lowest hanging fruit that you've got to increase your stack substantially.
Right, right. Definitely. It's money that's already there. It's money typically the Bitcoiner wants to sell, but their main pain point is that if I sell it, then I'm paying a 30, 40, sometimes higher percent fee for closing out retirement account early. But the beauty with having multi-sig retirement accounts is that all of a sudden you don't have to pay a 30 to 50% fee to withdraw it. You just pay, a small 1% fee to get access to that tax free, which ultimately is going to well pay for itself. So I think that's really important. We covered retirement accounts, we covered trusts, the estate plan protocol. For those watching that perhaps have not gone through that process yet, the estate plan protocol, Bitcoin Advisor, I think is really robust. I mean, of all the ones I've seen, I think it's the best in the world, Peter. Again, I attribute a lot of this to you and the legal team, foresight and trying to be ahead of the competition. Um, as I understand it, the Bitcoin Advisor had the estate plan protocol and inheritance planning before anyone else in the world, and other companies. I don't want to say copied. I don't want to give a negative connotation to it, but perhaps you can give a better framing of how the Bitcoin Advisor attempts to always be ahead, because all these things are going to change. Retirement accounts are going to change. The tax laws are going to change, right? Especially if we're talking 20, 40-year time horizon. Like, what assurance can people watching this have that Bitcoin Advisor is going to be on the cutting edge of this into the future?
I think, and it's very important to note that these things are going to continually change, and there are going to be new services come to market that look shiny and cute that you'll be interested in, that you'll want to try. And we've done an exceptionally good job of avoiding all of those shiny objects up until this point. And we can, although our advice is ultra conservative and seems somewhat a little boring, it works. And we've got to understand that, we're not interested in picking up pennies in front of a steamroller for an extra 1 or 2% when the prize is 1,000x return in front of us. And this is where one of the things that I think clients can be assured of, that we are going to maintain our spot as, at the forefront of this industry, pushing the industry forward to make sure that, we're delivering the best that there is that a lot of the things that we do here were built for me personally. And I've got a lot vested in this, and I want to make sure that we've got the best available in the marketplace. And sometimes you've just got to create your own because it doesn't exist. So there are things we're working on now that we'll see come to fruition in the next 4 to 5 years. They're not ready for, prime time yet, but they're going to come to fruition that will, further increase and improve our service offering. And this is, like all software, it's a continual upgrade. It's an iteration. It's an iterative process that continues to get better and better and better. And I can share with you that when we first started doing this 8 years ago, it was very clunky. It was, compared to where we are now, it was awful. It was an awful process. However, the process has improved dramatically now that, we can take someone with no Bitcoin knowledge whatsoever, and in less than an hour, we can have them set up with a hardware wallet, a multi-sig collaborative custody arrangement where they have institutional grade custody for mums and dads with an estate plan protocol. That is a wild shift from taking someone with no understanding of Bitcoin to having institutional grade custody and a multi-sig collaborative custody setup. That's a wild improvement, and there's a sense of pride that goes into helping people do that this is the best form of custody that they could hope for, having no experience. And for even the most seasoned veterans in Bitcoin, they have a look at the process that we go through, and I haven't had any negative feedback yet as to how we could make meaningful improvements to the protocol or processes that we pursue. And that's of great pride to me that we're covering and ticking all the important boxes.
Yep. I think that's a great point. There's a lot there that you're not saying that I know you easily could, but about how, I think it's a very healthy balance between being the cutting edge, but also wanting to make sure security is number one priority and not chase shiny objects. So I think we have a really good balance of that. I think, just from looking at our estate plan compared to others, like I'm very confident that, we're still going to be a primary option and top consideration for a large number of people. So, and like you, I have a large amount of my energy, capital, and Bitcoin vested in this venture as well. So, yeah, Peter, I think this is a great explanation. Ultimately, for those watching, I hope this has been useful for peace of mind, because ultimately it's not just about when you pass on, it is about peace of mind today. So hopefully you see the value add in that. In the next video, we're going to be talking about protecting against lost keys, state capture, as well as the event of passing. So Peter, see you in the next video. Thanks.
Thank you.